I had never seen the woman before. She stood alone at the back of my father's funeral, holding a bouquet of white lilies. She never spoke to anyone. She never cried. But just before she left, she looked directly at me, smiled sadly, and said my name. My name is Julia Bennett, and the day I buried my father was supposed to be the hardest day of my life. I thought grief would be the only thing I had to carry home. I was wrong. Rain fell softly over the cemetery as friends, relatives, and neighbors gathered around my father's grave. One by one, they offered quiet condolences before walking back toward their cars. I thanked each of them, even though I barely remembered their faces.
The world felt distant.
Like I was watching someone else's life. That's when I noticed her. She stood beneath a large oak tree several yards away from everyone else. She wore a long black coat and held a bouquet of fresh white lilies against her chest. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't crying. She simply watched the ceremony with an expression I couldn't understand. I quietly asked my mother, "Do you know that woman?" She looked where I was pointing. For a brief second, the color disappeared from her face. Then she quickly looked away. "No," she answered too quickly. "I've never seen her before." Something about her reaction didn't feel right. After the funeral ended, people slowly began leaving. Within minutes, the cemetery was almost empty. I was placing flowers beside my father's grave when I heard gentle footsteps behind me. I turned around. The woman was standing only a few feet away. Up close, she looked to be in her early 50s. Her eyes were red, as if she had spent the entire night crying. She offered me the bouquet of lilies. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Julia Bennett." My heart skipped. I had never told her my name. She gave me a sad smile. "Your father asked me to give you something, but only after he was gone." From her coat pocket, she removed a small, worn envelope, sealed with dark blue wax. Across the front, in my father's unmistakable handwriting,
There were 6 words that made my hands tremble.
"For Julia," and no one else. As I reached for the envelope, my mother suddenly rushed toward us, shouting one sentence that made the mysterious woman freeze in place. My fingers had barely touched the envelope when my mother's voice echoed across the cemetery. "Don't give that to her." The words were so sharp that everyone who was still nearby turned to look. The mysterious woman froze. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, as if she had expected this to happen all along. My mother hurried toward us, her heels sinking into the wet grass. When she reached us, she wasn't looking at me. She was staring directly at the woman. "You promised," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "You promised him you would never come back." The woman lowered her eyes. "I promised I wouldn't come back while he was alive." Those words hit me like a wave. "You knew my father?" I asked. Neither of them answered. Instead, they continued staring at each other, carrying on a conversation without speaking. Finally, the woman turned toward me again. "Your father wanted you to have this." She gently placed the envelope in my hands. Before my mother could stop her, my mother reached for it. "No!" I stepped back instinctively, clutching it against my chest. I deserve to know why Dad wrote my name on this. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Julia, please." It was the first time in my life I had heard fear in her voice. Real fear. Not anger. Not sadness. Fear. I looked down at the envelope. The blue wax seal carried an old symbol I had never seen before. A tiny lighthouse. The same lighthouse my father used to sketch in the corners of his notebooks when I was a little girl. The woman noticed me staring. "He always said," she whispered, "a lighthouse doesn't hide people, it guides them home." Those words felt strangely familiar, like something my father had wanted me to remember. Carefully broke the wax seal. Inside wasn't a letter. It was an old brass key, faded black and white photograph, and a small handwritten note. Only one sentence was written. "Trust the woman standing beside you, even if no one else does." I slowly raised my eyes. The mysterious woman was gone. She had disappeared from the cemetery as quietly as she had arrived. I looked around in every direction. There was no sign of her. Only the bouquet of white lilies remained on the wet grass. Then I turned the old photograph over. My heart stopped. Written on the back, in my father's handwriting, were 8 words. She saved my life, but it cost her everything. When I looked closely at the old photograph, I realized my father wasn't alone in it. Standing beside him was the same mysterious woman, but the date on the picture made absolutely no sense. I couldn't take my eyes off the photograph. It was old enough that the edges had begun to curl, and tiny cracks ran across its faded surface. Standing beside my father was the same mysterious woman from the cemetery. She looked almost exactly the same. The same dark hair, the same gentle smile, the same eyes. Only one thing was different. The photograph was dated April 18th, 1992. I stared at it in disbelief. That couldn't be right. More than 30 years had passed, yet she hadn't seemed to age much at all. My mother slowly reached for the picture. "Churia." I pulled it away before she could touch it. "You knew her?" It wasn't a question. It was the truth. She lowered her head. "I hoped you'd never have to find out." "Who is she?" My mother's lips trembled, but no words came out. Instead, she whispered something that made my stomach tighten.
Your father spent 30 years trying to repay a debt that could never be repaid.
"A debt?" She nodded. "The woman you met today once saved his life." Before I could ask another question, she walked toward the cemetery exit. "Mom!" She stopped, but never turned around. "If you want answers," she said quietly, "follow the key." Then she left. I stood alone beside my father's grave, gripping the brass key tightly. The small lighthouse engraved on its handle caught the afternoon sunlight. Suddenly, I remembered something. When I was a little girl, my father used to take me to a tiny coastal town every summer. We always visited an old lighthouse overlooking the sea. He would smile, place his hand on the stone wall, and say,
One day, this place will help you understand who I really was.
Back then, I thought it was just another one of his strange sayings. Now, I wasn't so sure. The photograph, the lighthouse, the key, they were all connected. That evening, I searched through my father's desk at home. Hidden beneath a stack of old maps, I found a folded receipt. It was from a small seaside inn. The address made my heart race. It was the same town where the lighthouse stood. And written across the back, in my father's handwriting, were 5 words. Start where we first met. I looked at the brass key again. Whatever it opened, it wasn't in our house. It was waiting for me nearly 200 miles away. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something stronger than grief. I felt determination. Next morning, before sunrise, I packed a small bag, picked up my car keys, and started driving toward the coast. I had no idea what I would find, but deep down, I knew my father had planned this journey long before he died. When I finally reached the old lighthouse, someone was already waiting for me. And the first words they spoke made me question everything my mother had ever told me. The old lighthouse stood exactly as I remembered.
Oh.
Silent, watching over the sea like it had been waiting for someone. The wind carried the smell of salt through the empty parking lot as I stepped out of my car. Waves crashed against the rocks below, filling the air with a deep, steady rhythm. For a moment, I simply stared at it. This place had been part of my childhood, but today, it felt completely unfamiliar. As I walked toward the entrance, I noticed someone sitting quietly on a wooden bench overlooking the ocean. It was the same woman from my father's funeral. She looked up before I could say a word. "I knew you'd come." I stopped a few feet away. "Who are you?" She smiled sadly. "My name is Evelyn Harper." The name meant nothing to me. "My father trusted you." "He did." "My mother acted like she hated you." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "I don't blame her." The answer only confused me more. I reached into my pocket and held up the brass key.
What does this open?
She looked at the lighthouse for several seconds before answering. Not what? She whispered. Who? A chill ran through my body. Without another word, Evelyn stood and slowly walked toward the lighthouse entrance. I followed. Inside, an elderly caretaker greeted her with a gentle smile. You came back. Promised I would. She handed him the brass key. To my surprise, he didn't unlock a door. Instead, he opened an old wooden cabinet hidden behind the reception desk. Inside sat a weathered leather journal and a small metal box. The caretaker carefully placed both items on the table.
Your father asked me to keep these safe until Julia arrived.
I couldn't believe it. He knew my name. Did my father plan all of this? I asked. The old man nodded. Years ago. I opened the journal first. The very first page was written in my father's handwriting. If you're reading this, then Evelyn kept her promise. Tears filled my eyes. I had trusted her until the very end. But why? I turned the page. The next sentence made my heart race. The woman standing beside you isn't a stranger, Julia. I slowly looked toward Evelyn. She was crying. She has loved you since the day you were born. I froze. Nothing made sense anymore. If she had loved me all my life, why had I never met her? Before I could speak, Evelyn reached into her purse and removed a faded hospital bracelet. She placed it gently into my hand. The bracelet carried only 2 names, Julia Bennett, and beneath it, Guardian, Evelyn Harper. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I looked at Evelyn in complete disbelief, and her next confession changed everything I thought I knew about my own birth. I stared at the hospital bracelet lying in my palm. Julia Bennett, Guardian, Evelyn Harper. My hands began to tremble. I looked up at Evelyn, searching her face for an explanation. I don't understand, I whispered. My parents raised me. They did, she replied softly. They loved you with everything they had. Then why is your name on this? Evelyn took a slow breath before sitting across from me. Because the day you were born, your father almost lost both you and your mother. I felt my heartbeat quicken. She looked out the lighthouse window before continuing. There were serious complications during the delivery.
Your mother needed emergency surgery.
And your father was forced to make decisions no parent should ever face. I swallowed hard. For nearly 6 hours, no one knew if either of you would survive. She paused, fighting back tears. Your father couldn't be in 2 places at once. He stayed beside your mother while someone had to care for you. You? She nodded. I was the head nurse on duty that night. The words settled over me slowly. I held you before anyone else in your family could. I fed you, sang to you, and stayed beside your crib until your father finally came to see you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, you weren't a stranger? No. You've known me since the day I was born. Her eyes filled with tears. Yes. I remembered what the journal had said. She has loved you since the day you were born. Now those words finally made sense. But, I asked, why did Mom react like that at the funeral? Evelyn lowered her head. Because after you both recovered, your father and I remained friends. She quickly added, only friends. We wrote letters every Christmas. We spoke once each year on your birthday. Your mother knew about it, but after a while, she couldn't separate gratitude from jealousy. She reached into the metal box and removed dozens of neatly tied envelopes. These are every letter your father ever sent me. The oldest one was written just 3 weeks after I was born. The newest, only 2 months before his death. I carefully opened the final envelope. Inside was a single handwritten page. At the bottom, my father's signature was followed by one heartbreaking sentence. If Julia is reading this, then I couldn't keep my last promise. My vision blurred.
I turned the page over.
There was one final instruction. Take Evelyn to the old pier. She'll show you what I've protected for 30 years. I looked at Evelyn in silence. She wasn't crying anymore. She simply whispered, it's finally time. When we reached the old pier, Evelyn unlocked a weathered storage box. What my father had hidden inside changed the meaning of his entire life. The old pier looked abandoned. Years of wind and salt had turned the wooden boards gray, and most people had forgotten it even existed. Evelyn walked to the very end without saying a word. Beneath one of the benches sat a weathered metal storage box, secured with a small brass lock. She smiled through her tears. Your father made me promise I wouldn't open this unless you were standing beside me. She slid the brass key into the lock. It clicked open. Inside wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It was a neatly wrapped bundle of letters, a small velvet pouch, and an old video cassette labeled simply, "For Julia." My heart pounded. Evelyn gently handed me the cassette. Your father recorded this 6 months before he passed away. That evening, we borrowed an old VHS player from the Lighthouse Museum. The screen flickered to life. Then, there he was. My father. He smiled the moment he saw the camera. "Hi, sweetheart." My eyes instantly filled with tears. "If you're watching this," and then I didn't get the chance to tell you goodbye the way I wanted. He took a slow breath. "You've probably spent days wondering who Evelyn really is." He looked toward someone standing behind the camera and smiled. "She was never my secret. She was my guardian angel." He explained how Evelyn had saved both my life and my mother's during one of the most dangerous nights our family had ever faced. After that day, he promised he would never let her kindness be forgotten. But as the years passed, misunderstandings and unspoken fears slowly built walls between everyone he loved. Instead of hurting us with arguments, he chose silence. Looking back, he knew it had been the wrong choice. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I should have trusted my family with the truth." Then he picked up the small velvet pouch. "If Evelyn kept her promise, this belongs to you now." Inside the pouch was a delicate silver lighthouse pendant. "The lighthouse isn't a place," my father continued. "It's a reminder. When life becomes confusing, be the person who guides others toward the truth instead of hiding from it." His voice began to break. "I've made mistakes, Julia. But if this journey has taught you anything, I hope it's this. Love isn't measured by the secrets we keep. It's measured by the courage to tell the truth before it's too late." The screen slowly faded to black. No dramatic confession. No hidden fortune. Just my father's final lesson. I looked at Evelyn. Without saying a word, she hugged me like she had wanted to for 30 years. A month later, we invited her to dinner. For the first time in decades, there were no misunderstandings, no silence, and no fear. Only stories. Stories my father had hoped we would one day share together. As I fastened the silver lighthouse pendant around my neck, I looked toward the ocean and smiled. Some people enter our lives for only a moment. Others quietly protect us for a lifetime. And because my father finally found the courage to leave behind the truth, a stranger became family. And I never lost her again.